Hello and welcome to the RYLACast, the official podcast of Camp Ryla, Rotary District 5810. I'm Greg Tepper. The man over there, I'm just sitting in my shanty, sitting over there in what I can only presume is a palace, is the man they call Josey, Andrew Utz. Hi, Josey.
Well, hello, Greg. No palace. No palace. More like a shack. If you're in a shanty, I'm in a shack.
No, I got the shanty. Are you? So, for those who don't know, we are still presently sheltering at home while we're recording these.
No, I'm at the studio.
Oh no, this is embarrassing. This is really embarrassing. Are you tired? Are you tired of your house?
I am not.
Wow. Okay, check out Johnny Big House over here. Okay,
I know.
Cool.
We
got so much room. There are rooms I haven't even been in.
Rooms I haven't. Maybe I'll just record in that room.
I don't know. Perhaps I'll just change it up. No, I'm pretty tired of my house.
Pretty tired of yours?
Yeah, but that's mostly because I live here. And that guy. Ugh.
Do you like to walk around the neighborhood to get a feel like, oh, I haven't seen that corner brick yet?
There are, by the way, suddenly, big walk guy. I'm a big walk guy. Big walk. Because I don't own a bicycle, but it feels like bikes are really making a comeback right now. Like they're really popping. Feels like bikes are there. Anyway, let's ask another guy if bikes are popping. We're joined by our guest for the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, it's John Huber. Yay!
Yay!
John, do you have a bike?
We have a stationary bike, Le Peloton, and we also have, Katie has a bike. I am regular bikeless at the moment, but in the market.
Now, wait a second.
Yes.
You have a Peloton?
Oh, yeah. We grabbed that before Christmas last year.
Wow. Do you love it?
We know we'd be faced with it every single day now.
Would you, and they're keeping in mind they're not a sponsor of the podcast yet. Would you recommend the Peloton? Because it seems like I got to be really into bikes.
That would help. Yeah. You know, that would definitely help the situation, but it's not mandatory. You know, it's not a prerequisite.
Okay. So I don't have to love bikes to have a Peloton.
No. You can, you could do the class, or you could go ride through the hills in Arizona if you want. It's like you could choose multiple things. And now it's like they've gone full workout system with it. So you can do stretching and all this other core workout stuff through your TV. So they're expanding.
So a question, and I promise we'll get off of exercise talk here in just a moment, but like, do you have to be doing the exercise? Because like what I'd love to do is just watch someone cruising through Arizona while I sit there eating a hoagie.
So the bike, the video does move by itself if you just like to sit on the bike and watch. That's completely possible.
Hold on, let me yell at my wife. Honey, we're buying a Peloton.
Peloton, info ryla5810@gmail.com.
That's a free advertisement. All right, we're not here just to talk about his stationary bike. We've brought John Huber on as our very special guest here on the RYLACast. We're going to talk with him in just a moment. But first, John, we sent you a very long list of words and phrases and asked you to select one. Do you remember which one you selected?
Absolutely. Am I supposed to fill in the gap now?
You go right ahead.
All right. I chose emotional control.
Emotional control. And here with the big box segment, here with the you get the extra piece of chicken in this segment. Here with the something to think about is Andrew Josey.
Well, thank you, Greg. Yes, emotional control. Talking about a camp of 17-year-old boys and girls. Nothing to talk about at a leadership camp with teenagers.
You're a little too on the nose there, man. 17-year-old Greg is currently like rolling over in his little Blink-182 grave.
Oh man, 17-year-old Josey with bright eyes. Yeah, I mean, bottling up all the anger, but great topic. So hats off to John for a great topic. I stumbled upon, Greg, you got me in this You read the Harvard Business Review.
I do. I just do it for fun.
Right. And so I was like, I got to read a more reputable magazine, and stumbled upon a Forbes article about how great leaders manage their emotions. Now, I don't know what it says when the great leader that's the subject of the article is someone I've never heard of. But that's the manager or owner of the world's largest irrigation franchise, which is apparently full of a bunch of hot-headed people. But it's the idea of the article. It culminates in a 4-step process to create a learning opportunity, and it at each, I guess, emotional blow up, for lack of a better term. And this how to handle emotions is really key when talking about leadership, because you can either turn people off right from the get-go when you, as a leader, you encounter a certain situation, or you can gain kind of a follower for life kind of thing. So this 4-step process is mostly centered around issues where you're butting heads. And it says that small actions have major impact, which is important because the first step is the individuals must acknowledge that there's a problem. If you've got one person that's emotionally charged and the other person doesn't see any issue with it, then no problem, go on about your day, which is not the case. But so individuals first acknowledge there's an issue, and then what a team member is doing well. So I don't know if you've ever used the sandwich method, the whole good, bad, good, when you present it. Your wife has probably used that in teaching.
Yes, that is absolutely true. She's used that every single day teaching kids over Zoom.
So you got to hit them with something good. You got to make them feel good initially. And then second, present the issue. And this article talks about presenting the issue first by asking the other colleague permission to discuss it with them, which I thought was a very mature way to handle things. Of, hey, I see this as an issue. Can we talk about it? And then you move forward and talk openly about solutions. And this has to be a two-way conversation. It's really important, especially in these emotionally charged times, that you have that two-way conversation and ask the question. As a leader, I'm curious, now that you've had some time to reflect, you've heard what I did, what would you have done differently, knowing what you know now, knowing both sides of the story. And then 4, further acknowledgement, and ending the conversation by recognizing the employee, and then set the tone for the rest of the day in that positive, good, bad, good. Set the tone. We're all feeling happy and ready to go.
Do you like the bad sandwich idea?
Like bad, good, bad?
No. Because remember, we're talking like it's called a bad sandwich, right? Because it's bad sandwich with good bread.
Oh, okay, right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like you don't call it a bread. You don't put peanut butter on a piece of bread and call it a bread sandwich.
I will now.
Well, don't. But do you like that?
Yes and no. I've got a love-hate relationship with that. I think you have to know your audience.
I think it's sometimes it can feel kind of childish, and like it can feel kind of like talking down to somebody in the wrong situation. Do you know what I mean?
No, I do know what you mean, and there's sometimes when I'm on the receiving end, and I like the bad sandwich because I feel like I can't do anything right, and then I just kind of hit a wall. But I definitely see, and I've been on the leadership end of the bad sandwiches gone bad, where you hit them with something good.
This has turned into a weird conversation.
It's like getting real with.
I'm like, how many sides to the sandwich are there?
Is this like a cube? Like, is there a depth element to it too?
I've given everybody something to really think about.
Well, I got to tell you, I feel like your other points were very, very good. I want to be very clear. That was an excellent segment, not just because your points were great, but also you got me thinking about sandwiches now.
Nice.
Thank you, Josey. That was excellent. I appreciate you doing that. And now, Josey, is it okay if I bring in our very special guest?
Absolutely.
We go live to Denver, Colorado, where we will go to our chief mountain correspondent. We're joined by John Huber. Yay!
Thank you.
John, thanks for joining us.
Wonderful to be here. Finally.
Do you mean that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, there's a twinge bit of nervousness going on, but of course, I'm always glad to talk to you two guys.
I get nervous talking to Josey too.
I get nervous talking to me.
You are somebody whose RYLA story I am very interested in. And so I'm going to ask you to tell that now in front of a giant audience. So please tell us the RYLA story. Yeah, like how you got involved and all that jazz.
Start from the top.
Okay.
Big explosion in space.
Camper 96, I believe. 1996 would have been my junior year of high school. So my mom worked as the registrar at my high school. And so I'm not sure who the RYLA rep was that called, but said, hey, you need to pick some students. And luckily enough, I wound up on that list and got to go check out this cool camp that nobody else from my high school actually wound up going to that year. So let's see what else. I've been coming back to Camp RYLA off and on every summer since then, and yeah, they can't give me away. What more do you want to know about this RYLA story?
I'll jump in and ask a question because we've had some people that we've talked to. I won't name names, but we've had some people on this podcast who, like, while they're at camp, it didn't necessarily click with them. Like the whole idea, the raison d'etre, so to speak, of RYLA didn't necessarily click with them while they're at camp. But we've also had other people that, like, it clicked immediately, like, oh, okay, no, I totally get what this is about. I totally get, like, why this is going to have an impact on me. Like,
sure.
Which camp do you fall into?
Maybe a funny kind of in between. I knew at the end of camp that we were all experiencing something special, and I was wrapped up in all of it. I was on the stage and giving a testimonial to everybody and crying my eyeballs out by the end of the camp. So of course it touched me in the ways it was supposed to, and got to me. It sent the message home, but at the same time, I don't think I realized quite the depth of how much I would be involved in my future life with Camp RYLA. So maybe that was kind of the hidden part that I didn't notice right away.
So we'll fast forward. So what do you do now besides live in Denver and eat sandwiches?
By trade, I am a commercial photographer, and I shoot photos for a local furniture company for their website, and then I also travel around the country shooting model homes for a home builder as well. So
I'm going to ask a follow-up to that. How'd you get involved in that?
Through networking, believe it or not. I landed the furniture shooting job through a friend of mine who I worked with at another company, a startup, where I was eventually laid off, and we stayed connected and just communicated after that happened and stayed friends. And he called me up and let me know that he was working another job and they were looking for another photographer. So that turned out to be a beneficial friendship.
Can you give me, a photography dummy, one piece of advice to make my photos not be bad?
Get closer.
All right, Josey, your question.
So
was that too easy?
No, that's perfect, dude. That's perfect. That's 100. That's exactly what I'm looking for.
If you don't like your pictures, always get closer.
That's good to know. I will veer away from the photography topic. So emotional control was the word you chose. Could you care to elaborate on why you chose that for this podcast?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I love how you guys kind of went like the hanky panky vibe with that to lead out the podcast. That was kind of funny.
Sir, nobody here. You're the first person to mention that particular
Yeah, no, I
phrase in this
caught
podcast.
the hint of that there. The
I
emotional
don't know.
control of
I
17
was thinking about Bible study.
So I kind of approached this from the standpoint of what has camp taught me that I try to use every day. And in retrospect, I remember my first like 10 years of camp being kind of a tumultuous emotional roller coaster of I have these things I want to say, but I'm too scared to say them because I'm afraid I'm going to cry in front of this group, or I'm not going to have a shaky voice and I'm not going to be able to get my point across and say what I really want to say. And eventually, after being in that comfortable environment of you guys, family, everybody that you trust, and that quote unquote safe space, it became pretty clear to me that I was not benefiting anybody by staying quiet, and I slowly began to learn that showing those emotions, and Josey, you kind of touched on this in your Forbes article, being able to show those emotions, I learned kind of lent I don't know, it enabled me to get my point across where I wouldn't have to necessarily drive the point home with words. It lent a sense of trust that I believed what I was talking about and I was invested in what I was talking about. And you should listen to me because I'm emotional about this and it's important. So it became a tool instead of something that I ran from and tried to hide from people.
We asked Katie the same question, but I'm interested in your response. When you go to camp and you're at camp, what is your moment? I feel like everybody has the moment that that happens at camp that you're like, all right, here it comes. Like this is it. It's gonna happen. That you get really excited about. Can you pinpoint? Do you have one that immediately springs to mind? Is like, oh yeah, that's what I most look forward to.
Well, that's two different things for me, just for me though, because the thing I most look forward to is obviously laboring in the heat and building giant obstacle courses. Because digging holes is my favorite thing to do out there at Camp RYLA. But honestly, that really is what I love doing. The moment that the week turns around for me, though, is when we start lighting the smudge pots for campfire. We start loading up the golf cart with Kevin Foster and laying out the pots, and the fires start kicking up, and the meetings release, and everybody starts to make their way down there, and the older staff is lining up along the route, and most of us are gathered down at the fort already. That's kind of the point where the arm, like the hair on my arm, starts to stand up, and you get those vibes of like, oh, what's happening, and you start to look at each other, and there's a little glint in everybody's eye because they're trying not to cry too, and they're exercising that emotional control.
Ooh, that's a good callback.
Nice. Which that brings up the point that you have a somewhat different perspective than I'll say the majority of guests we've had on the podcast. You are a part of the group that quite literally makes camp happen with lighting the smudge pots, digging the holes for the challenge course. But you've been a counselor, is that correct?
I have. Yeah, I was counselor for 2 years.
So how is your experience, or not experience, but your view of camp changed that you've been quite literally everything at camp?
I think that perspective has given me just more respect for my co-counselors and everybody else who is there volunteering with me when I'm there that week, more than anything. Knowing what goes into each role. The counselors, words can't explain how difficult and emotionally taxing that job and that role, opportunity, all of those words can be. And then, of course, throwing your physical self into working on the crew for the week. That's a completely different job and kind of exertion. But then you look at the people who do all the registrar work behind the scenes. These people are working around the clock. The strategy planners, we have people working around 20, I want to say 24 hours, but 365 days a year on this 1 week of camp. And so seeing and participating in each one of those roles just really hits home of these people are here because they love putting and pouring themselves into this project as much as I do.
Mm-hmm. Well, now it now comes the time in every podcast where we give you the floor to plug show, podcast, musical group, mountain range, whatever you
planet. I don't know if you have a favorite planet.
Let's see. My favorite website right now, I open the day each morning with a visit to Gary Larson's The Far Side.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
Oh, I'm not even kidding.
Oh, John, you are a man after my own heart.
It's my homepage.
Oh.
And so I don't even open the email until I read the first comics of the day.
Oh, John, you're the best.
And then of course, my podcast, it's not my podcast, but I'm a big fan of the Joe Rogan Experience. A lot of other Jeep podcasts because, of course, we're just fiending for the outdoors right now. And so I like to watch other people drive their Jeeps around far flung off places I can't go to right now.
We have a, usually the marketing department for RYLA puts out a nice graphic of for each podcast. And I'm going to ask them if they're listening to this, that the plug should be watch other people drive Jeeps. That's what it should be. Put that on there. Okay. And so now, John, I'm gonna issue a challenge to you because you may remember that your wife Katie was a guest on the podcast recently.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
indeed.
And we gave her the same question. Okay, and the same question was, would you like to tell an embarrassing story about your spouse? Now, I'm not going to tell you what your spouse said. Okay, this is the prisoner's dilemma. I'm not going to tell you what your spouse said. So, if you would like, you don't have to say anything. We can just bid goodbye. But if you would like to tell an embarrassing story about your wife, the floor is yours.
Embarrassing stories.
This is the meanest thing we've ever done on this podcast.
Oh my goodness, you guys. You're trying to cause discord in my home, I
think. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, you're right.
I love my wife. I have no embarrassing things to tell about her.
Okay, John has opted out. That's an interesting choice. John, thanks for being our guest, man.
I really appreciate it, you guys. You made this a lot easier than I thought.
Yay, John Yay! And now, a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor could be you. Hey, it's your friend Greg. Do you have a business that you'd like to get off the ground and reach dozens, if not hundreds, of listeners with a poorly produced podcast? Well, hey, go to some other podcast. If you want to be on a podcast juggernaut, why don't you sign up for the RYLACast and you can have your ad right here. If you'd like more information, Josey.
InfoRYLA5810@gmail.com. And if I may offer a plug, it's a wild ride, but we'll get you there.
I'm glad I laughed as much on the show as I do listening to the show.
Oh my God.
This has been great.
This is the most. Oh man, everyone's gonna want to advertise for this podcast now. Okay, it's my job to bring us,
gentlemen. Peloton first.
It's my job to bring us home with something to leave you with, and on the topic of emotional control, and I want to talk a little bit about a place where there's almost no emotional control, and that is Twitter. So guys, let's have a talk. And especially right now, so I mentioned this before, we're recording this on April 30th. We're all sheltering at home, and right now, look, emotions are high. We've all been in our houses for a while, right? We've all been in our houses for a while. We're a little sick at home. But I am absolutely astonished at the number of people who want to pick fights about like this particular crisis. It is amazing how you think that in a moment of unity, instead we would find a way to yell at each other. It just doesn't make any sense to me. There's a lack of emotional control. But what I want to bring this back to is I think that especially in times of crisis, this is when emotional control is particularly important for leaders. In a time where right now everybody's being affected by this in some way or another, either directly, indirectly, however. But it's important that whenever you turn to your leaders, that even if they are not totally in control, I think it's important for people to look up on that stage, look up at that podium, look at that live stream, and say, you know what? That guy at least has control of his emotions. Because I think that when a leader loses control of his emotions, you start to question whether or not he's got control of anything. And that's something that I think has really come to bear as I've been watching leaders, I've been watching government officials, I've been watching doctors and scientists and stuff like that, all talking about this particular crisis. What I think is interesting is the ones who I think have been the most effective are the ones who have been able to keep their cool, are the ones who have been able to control their emotions. That is why Twitter will never be president. And so that is something to leave you with. Okay.
Josey, is that all right? Nicely done, Greg.
Good. Sorry, I've been reading too much Twitter, and Twitter is the worst. Follow me on Twitter at Tepper. All right, that is going to do it for us. John, thanks for being our guest, dude.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So you mentioned this earlier, but I'll ask you to mention it again. You're saying this wasn't as bad as you thought it would be?
No, it's painless.
Oh, good. See, this is a good plug for getting
painless and pleasant.
This is for getting us getting other guests. We need these types of reviews from our guests. So
I can understand that.
Thanks for not talking about that thing you promised we wouldn't talk about on the air.
No problem, guys.
Yeah. Okay. That's going to do it for us. Thanks to John Huber for being our guest. If you like this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe, and tell a friend. And here with an antiquated way of telling a friend about the RYLACast is Josey.
Go ahead and find one of those dirty Jeeps in the parking lot and write, "Listen to the RYLACast" in the mud with your finger.
Oh, see, that's good guerrilla marketing.
Thanks
to John Huber and his Jeep for being our guest. And Josey, thanks for your courage.
Thanks, Greg.
See you next time on the RYLACast.